friend Chuck picked it, and that was great. But where we stayed is called the Farnsworth Inn. You guys can literally Google this right now if you want. So the Farnsworth Inn was a home that's been converted into an inn, but it was a home back from the days of the Civil War. And okay, so that's all I knew. That's all I knew.
Another thing about ghosts, like hotels have got to be these old homes, historic homes, hotels. A lot of activity happens in those places. And so whether or not you can feel or you're clairvoyant or whatever, like you can just sense it energetically. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Trust the Universe with Missy and Catherine. This is a podcast where we talk about grounded spirituality, trust, and surrender for sensitive people and empaths who want to trust the universe just a little bit more and learn how to release control, which is a difficult thing to do. But before we get started, we're going to be talking about some ghosts and visualization stories today, which is going to be fun and interesting. And I just want to assure everybody this isn't going to be like a scary, horrible, we saw like, a dead Victorian child ghost haunting us like in like our bedroom. It's more just experiences we've had and what we kind of think they mean and more about an exploration of how energy works in this universe. What do you think about, or is there anything you want to say, Missy?
Yeah, I just want to say that we have preconceived notions about ghosts. So I really want to talk about what a ghost is actually and how we actually have power, more power than ghosts.
Yes, I love that. So we'll dive into all of that and we'll share some stories about visualizations, ghosts, or visual spiritual experiences that we've had too. Because I haven't really seen ghosts, but I've had a couple experiences of some things. But before we do that, we're gonna go and we're gonna each share our wink from the universe moment. So it's either something that a product we've really been appreciating, a delightful moment of synchronicity, or just something lovely that's happened. So Missy, what is your wink from the universe this week?
Well, mine is a skincare product, which is funny. So I've been using it for a while, but as we get into like I have really dry skin, so it's from Ilia and it's called Super Serum Skin Tint SPF 40. So what I like about it is I am a multitasker, and so is this product. So it's like all the good for you skin things like a serum, plus it's like a little bit of makeup, but it's more like a tint and the SPF. And I just feel like we're going to Bali. I just want to bring one thing and put it on and be good to go.
That's good because I was like, in my head, I was like, there's just no way I'm bringing makeup to Bali. Like these people are just gonna have to deal with me in like my natural like crone state because I can't imagine packing all of it and then like putting it on every day. So that's cool to find something that's like in between and helps with all of that. So I'll have to try that out.
Yeah. How
Um,
about
yeah, well, I had a fun one. Okay, so AJ and I recently returned from Florida. We were there for 2 weeks. We kind of just had a nice long vacation. We were kind of south of Boca Raton in South Florida. And whenever I go to bodies of water, I really basically anytime I like go in nature, I'm always kind of like hoping nature will give me a gift. And one of my favorite gifts to get from places of nature are hagstones. Have you ever heard of hagstones or do you know what they are?
you?
So they are rocks and stones that have had holes naturally bored into them by the pressure of the water, over millennia, essentially. And when I was in Indiana a couple of years ago, we went hiking in our favorite state park, and I love this place. It's on the Tippecanoe and the Wabash rivers. It's so beautiful. And when I got out, I was just like, I want to find a heart-shaped hagstone. I just don't know where that was coming from, but I just like had this visualization and I was like, and I'm going to take it home and it's going to remind me of how much I love this place. And when we got to the confluence of the two rivers on our hike, I like looked down in the bank and there was like this fist-size hagstone that had a hole bored through it. And so ever since then, I've been obsessed with hagstones. And one day I was walking along the beach and I was like, I would really love a hagstone from the ocean because I have them from rivers. I think maybe it's more common to find in rivers. Um, and I was open to whatever the ocean wanted to give me. Maybe it was going to be a unique shell, maybe it was going to be something else. But I had the sense like I was going to find a hagstone, and I look down and I find this beautiful, it's like a really small little hagstone. It's perfect. And I look at it and I'm like, I'm going to make this into a necklace. And I
Oh,
did. So hagstones are these naturally, like they're these naturally formed occurring things, but they are used in folklore and magical protection. Like people would hang hagstones around their cattle's necks for protection from predators or disease, or they would hang the hagstone on their bedposts for protection too. And so the other way people use hagstones is they say that if you look through a hagstone and through the little hole in the stone, it's a portal into the world of the fairies. So
ooh.
it's just like right up my alley. And normally they're bigger, the ones I've seen, but this one was so small and perfectly sized that I was just like, this is meant to be a necklace. So I just put it on today. I put it on this existing necklace I have that already has like a quartz crystal on it. And
Yeah,
it like fit perfectly on the chain. And I just like saw it there, like sitting in my
I
collarbone.
love it.
I was like, I feel like a freaking witch. I've got like my hagstone necklace on, my protective, I'm really into like protective and meaningful jewelry. I think it's such like a beautiful, magical thing for folks to use. And if it's from nature, even better. So that's
Yeah,
my,
and the color I like too.
yeah, yeah, so fun. So you'll get to see this in
Nice.
person in Bali because I'm gonna
Woo,
never take this off my person.
I love it.
Okay, well, that's fun to hear. So let's talk ghosts. So I don't really have a philosophy around ghosts. I will say I'll share some stories of experiences I've had that involved visuals, but I have never seen a ghost, and I would be scared if I did. So I understand if people are like, "Oh, this is like a nervous thing," but I want to say that I believe in ghosts and I believe people who have seen ghosts. I think they exist, they are real, and that some people have the clairvoyance ability to see ghosts. I think it's a gift. And I think through listening to today's podcast, maybe Missy, especially, who definitely has seen plenty of ghosts, can give some tips on how to ground that talent so it's not so overwhelming. But Missy, what did you want to start off with talking about ghosts or any of your counsel around that?
Well, so I think everybody knows this, but I'm an energy healer, so I see everything in the world as energy. So if we think about ghosts, how I view ghosts, they're uh, a like a what's that word, conglomeration, is that the right word,
Yeah.
of energy, right? So they're the beliefs and their emotions of a person who used to be on this earth but has now departed, but left like an imprint. So that's the important piece I want to say, left an imprint of their emotions and their beliefs and maybe even memories that still here we can touch or feel or connect or see that impression of energy, but it's not that person. So this is the really important thing to think about with ghosts is we are more powerful than any ghosts because we are a spirit in a body. And that's like really powerful. To have a spirit with a body is really powerful. And that's why spirits come to earth to have a body to experience and learn different things. So we are most powerful as spirit in a body, but these are actually spirits. They don't have a body. There is no body. So they are not as powerful. They can't do anything to us. And not only that, I actually think it's even almost quote less than that because it's not their full spirit isn't there. I think a full spirit is probably out there somewhere else. This is literally an impression of a snapshot, I would say, of time and space. And that's all. It can't do anything to you.
So it's like an old Polaroid. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
okay. That's really good to know. And so the ghost isn't necessarily like the spirit of the person themselves. It's more this left behind energetic residue.
That's how I view it. I think other people might say see it differently, but that's how I view it. And okay, I will also say though that which I don't call a ghost though, spirits. There are spirits like we have spirit guides who are very alive and they're very much present and part of our lives. That's not a ghost. So to me, a spirit guide is not a ghost. Those are like two different things.
And well, maybe it actually is just best to kind of get into your stories because I think through you telling your experiences with the ghosts you've seen, I can ask some questions that I might have that will help clarify this for any of the listeners. So, well, I actually want to start with one question because we know from your origin story that you shared on the podcast earlier that like your first spiritual experience was seeing your grandmother who had passed. So, was that her spirit or was that a ghost, or do you not know?
Oh, okay. That is such a great question. I believe that was her spirit because we had a conversation, and I don't believe we really converse with ghosts. And I'll tell you my ghost story and why I sort of believe that. So to me, I was conversing with her spirit because my feeling is she is actually my spirit guide. Like I can feel emotional, right? And that she's my spirit guide. So we had a conversation. If she was a ghost, I wouldn't be able to have a conversation.
Got it. Okay. So why don't we just dive in? Let's hear a couple of your stories. I can ask some questions and then, hear your philosophy, and then I can share a couple of my experiences too. So what is a ghost story that you want to tell us, Missy?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite crazy ghost stories. So when I was in my 20s, so Chuck is my husband. So Chuck and I went on a road trip and we went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where you may know that is home of the Gettysburg, battle. That's like really, I think like historically, I think it was the place where more people died in the United States at one time than any other time in history in the United States. I believe it's something similar to that, right? So during the Civil War, right? It's a big giant battle in this town. So his mom said, "Oh, you guys are going to Gettysburg. You should stay at this cute bed and breakfast thing, or inn." And so we're like, "Oh, okay." And back then I didn't check things like now I'm in charge of where we stay. So I'm very sensitive about where we stay. But back then, Chuck picked it, and that was great. But where we stayed is called the Farnsworth Inn. You guys can literally Google this right now if you want. So the Farnsworth Inn was a home that's been converted into an inn, but it was a home back from the days of the Civil War. And okay, so that's all I knew. That's all I knew. So it's November, it gets dark really early. We go to check in to this inn, and it turns out we're the only people staying there because it's way off seasons. It's like in the middle of November, it's cold, it's dark. So they show us to our room, and then they say, "Okay, well, nobody's here tonight. So if you need anything, leave us a note and we'll get it in the morning. But here's the key to get in and out. And don't worry, no one else is here. You don't have to worry about being quiet." And I was like, okay. So I was already starting to feel, ooh, okay, something's weird here. I don't know. This was,
Can I interrupt you with a
yes,
question? Were you aware of you were aware of your spiritual gifts at your time, but where were you in your journey with them?
this was really before my spiritual awakening. Oh, yeah, it was. So I wasn't in tune. I knew that I was repressing a lot of things because I, over the years, had seen things. So this isn't my first ghost story, but it's actually my best ghost story. So I had mostly repressed things. So I didn't totally trust myself, but I could feel, oh, this is weird here. And by the way, I'm going to say that Chuck doesn't, at this point, now he does, but at this point, he didn't believe in anything like this. So he didn't, it wasn't stuff we talked about. So we go out to dinner and we come back home and it's dark and we walk in. We had to walk upstairs. We were on the second floor. So it's all dark in there. And we walk up to the room, and then Chuck, I think, forgot something downstairs. So I was in the room by myself, and he ran back down the stairs. And then I heard him like scamper all the way back up, and I go, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "I don't know. I don't know why I just ran back up here, but I don't know. There's something made me run." And I was like, "Okay, that's kind of weird, right?" And then we both started getting so scared that we literally left, went in our car, and started driving around like, let's find like people, right? Like this, something feels too desolate here. So we drove around. I think we went and we had dessert somewhere. And I was just like, oh my gosh, let's just be around people. But then basically that closed. So we had to go back. So now it's probably 10 o'clock at night. Everything is dark. We unlock the door. As we're going up, we hear things like I hear things. Like I hear things in up like above our heads. Like and he's like, yeah, I don't know. And so we scampered up into our room, we shut the door, and we're like, oh my God, this is so scary. Like, it's so scary. And then pretty soon we got ready for bed. He fell asleep, and I didn't sleep the entire night. I was like literally sweating. I was like in my bed. So I sleep on the, so, well, actually, it's funny. I actually sleep on the right now, but whatever reason, I was definitely on the left hand side that time. He was on the right. I left a little bit of the light on because I was scared. He passed out, and the whole night I was awake, like looking around. I was drenched in sweat, and I'm not even somebody who sweats a lot, but I was so scared. And I would hear things. I heard things. I okay. Then some point at, I don't know, maybe around 3 a.m., I'm laying on the bed, awake, and then I feel like, I would say, the weight of a cat sit on my foot, like basically I could feel it, like a cat. This is what it felt like. A cat jumped on my bed and sat on my foot or my feet right there at the left hand side bottom of the bed.
Oh,
And I
hell
was
no.
like, oh my God. And so I looked, and actually, interestingly, I'm clairvoyant, so I can see. This ghost story doesn't have to do with seeing. It was feeling. And I knew, like, oh my God, there is a ghost right there. But I looked and I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything. And so, anyways, that whole night, super scared. The next morning, so that was the end of that. The next morning, the sun comes up. I hadn't slept the whole night. We come downstairs for breakfast. So the inn also does a breakfast. So we sit down at the table. I didn't say anything. I had told Chuck that I didn't sleep all night. I told him a cat or something sat on me. I told him all the things I was hearing. And he's like, okay, I don't know. Right. So we sit down at the table, and the waitress comes and she starts pouring the coffee. She goes, how was your night? And Chuck goes, fine. I go, no, not fine. I didn't sleep at all. And she goes, oh, really? Why not? She said, what room were you in? And I said, oh, we were in the blood. I explained it. She goes, oh, that's Dr. Blubbo's room. Oh, there's a ghost in there. And I was like, oh my God, I told you. I said, yes, I knew there was a ghost in there. And she goes, oh yeah, there's an old lady. She comes and she sits down on the left-hand side of the foot of the bed. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my
And I told
God.
Chuck, I was like, I said it before she said it, right? Like, he knew that was true because we hadn't talked to this waitress yet, and nobody, it's not, we didn't read it anywhere. There was nothing that at that time that was written by it, around it, or anything. But like, that was like, so she's like, yeah, that woman lives there. She was, I think, the doctor's, I don't know, wife or something. And there's a boy that goes up and down the hallway with a ball, which is partly what we were hearing. And then we also heard that in the attic, which is where Chuck and I both heard things, people died, and there's bullet holes in the attic because the, whatever, I don't know which side, one of the sides, north or south, I don't know, whoever was shooting out, they would be, the snipers were in the attic, and they would shoot out of the attic, and then they were shot in the attic. So the whole attic was used for gunfire. And that's like what we would hear up there. So the whole place is full of like all ghosts from all different times. And that's my ghost story. I was very scared. And oh, this is the kicker. So years later, like probably 10 or more years later, we were watching one of those shows came on. It says, you've probably seen it, like 10 most haunted places in the US. Okay, I'm not even kidding you. Farnsworth Inn was number one on that show. And they zoomed in to the window of the room that we stayed in.
Oh my God. That's
You can look it up. It's crazy.
horrifying. I would not have been able to sleep. Like the sensation is almost like if somebody's sitting on your bed is almost worse than like a visual thing
Yeah.
happening there too. That's so funny because I stayed at the Biltmore in LA.
Yes,
And that has got to be crazy haunted because I
it
didn't
is.
see anything. But so this is another thing about ghosts. Like hotels have got to be these old homes, historic homes, hotels. A lot of activity happens in those places. And so whether or not you can feel or you're clairvoyant or whatever, like you can just sense it energetically. And the second it just doesn't feel that I believe that there are friendly ghosts out there, and I don't think that actually ghosts are necessarily malevolent, but like if they had a tough existence, like the energy of that existence is there and it can make you feel uneasy and unsettled. And So I'll just share this tip right now because it's coming to mind. Like we got into our hotel room. We were there for a wedding. Somebody was having their wedding at the Biltmore or something. I can't remember. And we got into our room and I was like, oh hell no. Like this room feels bad. But what are we gonna do? We're there for like a weekend. I'm not gonna, it's a wedding, whatever. So I like go to the closest drugstore I can and I get a huge thing of salt and a candle and I pour out the salt and into a cup that I get from like the ice machine or something. And I like give the salt instructions to like absorb all the negative energy. I always travel with crystals, so I like set the crystals around the room. I think we could open the windows in that hotel room, so I opened that too. And then like I clapped in every corner because that's also how I get stale energy out of there. And there's also this thing I learned in my feng shui training called the five protectors chant, which is too complicated to share here, but it's essentially a version of saying like you are not welcome here. Like you stand up like a Wonder Woman pose. And this is where it relates to ghosts not being in charge. Like you're actually in charge, but you essentially say, you're not welcome here. You must leave now. And that can really work with ghosts. So like salt, crystals, fresh air. I lit a candle, I got some fresh flowers, like all the things I know in feng shui to lift the energy. And then I did that chant and I was like, you're out. So I didn't see the ghost, but I could feel that energy there. And so those are just some tips that people could use if they find themselves staying in like a very haunted hotel.
Well, also, so I don't, so that's great that you have those tips. I think the great thing is we both have different tips. So what I didn't know at that time, but if I was in that same situation again, I would do something different. Well, I did nothing that time, but what I would do and what I have done now that I have more information is you ground the room. So for me, I just do this in my meditation. So I'll literally sit in the room. I'll imagine there's a big grounding cord in the center of that room if I'm trying to get rid of energy. And I'll imagine it, everything coming down and sucking down the middle. And then I'll also open up the roof or the ceiling and connect that to source energy and call in new energy to kind of clean it out. So it's almost like we're cleaning out a sink. So we're letting gravity do the work to pull out negative energy. We opened up the top to bring in new energy. And then I set a ring around my entire room. And I've done this many times. And I'll tell you another good story. I was in an Airbnb with my friends and I knew there was a ghost actually in the other, my friend's room. Like we kind of could feel it. So I wasn't in that room, but I didn't want her to come into my room or anything. I didn't know who else was going to show up that night. So I literally grounded my room. I connected it to source, but then I put a ring around my entire room and I said, no, you cannot. I own this space. And what I did is I put my energy into the whole room and I said, I have seniority and authority over my energy field, over this entire room that I am owning right now. Nobody goes in here. And that we were in Salem, Massachusetts, this particular story, and I heard all night somebody walking up and down the hallway between my room and my friend's room who had the other ghost, which was a different ghost. This is a different story, but all night. And then the next morning, I open my door. I go, Allison, what is going on? Like, what was happening? I literally thought it was like a real person almost, but I knew it wasn't. But that's how loud it was. And she goes, did you hear footsteps last night? And I was like, yes, all night down the hallway. She goes, yeah, me too. But she also is a spiritual person. She protected her. We each protected our own room. So they could only be in the hallway. So that's a
Yes.
good way.
Well, that's a very good tip to remember the energetic seniority and energetic authority. Like, and there are tools like, visualization, salt, all these things we're talking about, like, and they're very mundane things. You can go to a drugstore and get some salt. You can do this in your own meditation. So they're always at hand, these kinds of tools, if you enter a space. And so like I would say also when if you enter a historic space and it just feels off, you can know there's some energy around there. Like, call it a ghost, call it like energy, whatever it is. Most people are sensitive to that and sensitive and highly sensitive people and empaths are extra sensitive to that. And so I will say, like, when I entered the Biltmore Hotel, like I said, it wasn't like I knew exactly who it was or what it was. It was just like, ugh, kind of like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of energy. Now, there are plenty of historic places. Like my own home is a 300-year-old home. There's got to be ghosts here. I have never once felt in danger or negative here. We asked the previous owners who had lived here for 30 years if they had ever seen any ghosts, and these are like two federal workers, like as straight laced as can be, and they looked at each other and they were like, no, and then they're like, oh yeah, when we first moved in, when we came back from travels, the place would always smell like bacon. And I feel like smell can be like another
Yeah.
way in which ghosts manifest too. If
Yes.
that's like a bacon cooking ghost, sure, no problem.
That's really funny. Yeah. And also, you're right. Like, this is making me think like we can walk into a room and or a building and feel maybe grief. Like, suddenly you're overcome with grief. It's most likely because there is a lot of sadness maybe in that building. That's also why a lot of highly sensitive people, when we walk into a hospital,
Mm,
that's another place where we can feel really overcome. I'm not saying necessarily ghosts, but the energy of emotions. So
yes,
that's another way to think about it. We can see ghosts and things, but we can also feel emotions that are left in spaces.
100%. Do you have any other ghost stories to share?
I think that's all. I just mostly what those are my big ones, but I really just wanted to let you know that you have seniority and authority over or your own energy field. So say you're walking into like a building, maybe you're not staying there, you're just walking on a tour through a historic building and you want to keep yourself, you don't want to be affected maybe by the energy. Then I would really set up your aura and just put actually the color cobalt blue in your crown. That shows that color is seniority to all beings, meaning spirits, ghosts, anything. That show that color, they understand. Oh, when I see that color, that means I don't bother that person. That person is sort of off limits. So it's like a quick way to just kind of set yourself up before you walk into a room. I mean, you could do this anywhere, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
Okay, well, so my stories are not ghost stories, but they are like experiences of visualizations that I had that were like spiritual in nature. So if, I've said this before, but if people don't know, I have aphantasia, which means I cannot visualize. So if I close my eyes and you're like, picture an apple, I'm like, it's just black, like there's nothing there. And so the primary way in which I work spiritually is like tarot is a really big spiritual visual tool for me, and animal signs tend to come through. Like in the form of actual animals. Like, so I'll see, when we were visiting the open house for the Nature Witch Cottage, a great blue heron flew by, which is a sign of ours. So things like that. So I tend to get like my visuals in real life, you know. So I've
Wow.
never seen a ghost, but I have two stories about times where I've had visuals that were intense for me. And so the first one is when I used to meditate a lot more, especially in my early 30s into my mid 30s. And I had a pretty good meditation practice. Um, and all my meditation practice usually was closing my eyes and just counting my breath over and over again to 10. And what would often happen is I would go not asleep, but I would fall into this sort of like restful state that felt floaty. Don't know what that is, but it always felt good. But one night I was doing it and a it almost felt like a vision. It was these three shadowy ghosts. So it was like a black background. So my eyes are closed and like these three like smoky gold dusty figures come in. And so it's almost like I'm in a different portal a little bit. Like but I am seeing it. And so but it's also on the edge of my periphery. So it's not a very direct visual. And they're like, I knew they were here to take me. It almost felt like the ghosts of Christmas past. Like they were going to take me to show me something about a family member of mine. And
Oh,
I knew that. And I was like, oh my God, no. Like, and I immediately, like, my consciousness, like, snapped me back because I was too scared. My conscious self, who had regained control, essentially. So I think what was happening is in that deep meditative state, I was going into like what was going to be like a psychic experience, essentially, where I
yeah.
was going to be given some information about this family member for whatever reason. And that was too scary for me. And I was just like, this isn't going to happen. And so my conscious brain kind of wrenched myself away from that experience. And after that, I found it very, so it's not a ghost story, but like there's this experience of an energy coming in and like interacting with me in a way, and I was not ready for it. And it's been hard for me to meditate since then. This is probably like my early mid 30s or something. And I'm like always like, I don't know if what if that happens again? I don't know if I'm strong enough or ready enough for that kind of experience. And essentially, like a lot of my work, what I believe, especially as I get older, my work will be is in surrendering to those experiences, even though I'm kind of scared of them. So we'll see whether that means me seeing ghosts or anything else. But so that was one that like was always really prominent in my memory. And then this is one where I had a visual in waking time and I thought I was losing it because I never see anything. You know, it's like it's one thing for you to be like, well, there's like maybe a magic squirrel over there or whatever, or like a spirit, because you see things and your body is a little more acclimated, I think, to maybe seeing things. And I saw something and it was just like, what's happening? Okay, so this is several years ago. My grandmother was living with my parents and they were caretaking for her. My grandfather had passed away and my grandmother was about to pass away. So she was essentially in hospice in her room in my parents' house. And I went to stay with them for the last couple of weeks so I could help out. And I just also knew something in me, like, knew it was really important for me to be there and to experience that when she passed. Like, that was part of our soul contract together in a way. So as the days are going by, she's kind of slipping in and out of consciousness. And she had a beautiful full life. She was 96 when she passed. So, this was as good as you can get in some ways, but it's still such an intensely emotional time. And it's May. And as we're there, my parents' house backs up to a bit of wooded space. And one day I'm out there and I'm like, oh my God, there's like a baby deer in the backyard. And it was this tiny little fawn. It was all wrapped up. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God, did the fawn get abandoned by its mother? Like, should I call somebody? Now I Googled it and what I found out is that's what deer do. They leave their babies camouflaged in a beautiful, like safe space while they go eat, and they don't hunt, but they eat leaves or whatever. Um, so that predators aren't drawn to their pretty like helpless babies at that time. They actually stay camouflaged. The mother's never that far necessarily. So we see eventually the mother comes back and takes the baby with her. And so the next couple of days, the fawn sometimes is in our backyards by itself, but the mother is always returning. And, I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. And what a really sweet experience. And so like it ends up being the day before my grandmother passes away. My brother and his family come to visit basically to say their goodbyes. And they're leaving. And so they've parked in front of my parents' place and we're kind of waving at them from the door. And all of a sudden, I see the baby deer fawn like walking around their car and the baby deer goes under their car. And I'm like, I run out and I'm like, wait, you can't drive. There's a baby deer under your car. And I get like on my knees on the pavement and there's nothing there. And I'm
Ooh.
like, and my family's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I was like, am I losing my mind? With the stress of losing my grandmother, caretaking. And ultimately, I just decided the best I could realize. What I think was happening is like I was having this like sort of animal visual experience that was a reminder that even though my grandmother was leaving her mother, even though one day my mother will leave me, they're never really leaving you, right? And the fawn and her mother were the representations of that. And me seeing the fawn in that the only time I've ever visualized, so I saw a ghost deer is what I'm saying, but it was related to that. And I was like really questioning myself because since I've never seen anything, I was like, I must just be losing it because of the stress. But ultimately, I've decided it was my grandmother's spirit wandering, I think.
Yes.
And which I think happens, when a person is passing away, if it's not a sudden process, if it's more of a drawn out process, what I've read and what I think is there's a period where they're in between realms, and so their spirit is still in their bodies, but preparing to go into the next space too. And my grandmother's spirit was wandering as that baby deer, and I saw it. So
Yes.
That's my story.
I love that, but and I want to make a distinction that might be important to our audience is I believe, as you said, that you saw a spirit, your grandmother's spirit,
Yeah.
which is different than a ghost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I have
So
no ghost stories, so those are my spiritual.
yeah, but I love that because you saw the spirit of your grandmother, and you could also probably. I feel like when we have these experiences, I wouldn't say with the ghosts. Like with ghosts, it's more like, but with when it's a spirit, and I'll tell you a story about this in a minute, it changes us. Like, did you feel like in your body, oh, either changed or this is the truth of this? Like, did you feel different in your body?
Well, I was so shocked that it took a while, and like, she passed away the next day, and my mother and I were with her, luckily, and we were the only two people with her when she passed. And yeah, I mean, that experience overall, along with like the spirit of the baby deer, was a profoundly, yes, it was, I did feel different, especially afterwards in reflecting and trying to like process what it had meant to me. It was like, first off, I was like, well, I can see, psychic things sometimes, I guess, like, I don't
Yeah.
know how. And it also strengthened my belief that like animal signatures are like one of the ways in which I'm intuitive and spiritual.
Yeah, I think, and that's just a great way when we feel a connection, when we feel it in our body, something changes. I feel like in session when an ancestor will come in, I can feel the truth of that ancestor. Like something in me is like, oh yes. Whereas when I encounter a ghost,
Yes.
it's, I mean, I'm honestly gonna say even me, I don't love it. I'm gonna
No,
be
it
honest
doesn't
here.
feel
I
good.
don't love seeing ghosts. I'm not a person who wants to go ghost hunting. I 2 years ago had to get a connecting room. I'm a grown-ass woman, had to get a connecting room with my parents in this haunted, hotel. So I'm a baby too. Even with all my protection, I did all my protection and I left the door open between my room and my parents' room.
Aw.
That was literally 2 years ago. Okay, so none of us are immune, but the spirit, when a spirit comes to us, that is profound. So I will tell you this last story. I'm not going to get too into details, but this is also another part of my spiritual awakening. When I was 26, I had a boss who I was close to, but something snapped and he ended up he ended up killing his wife and his daughter. Okay. Then he ended up committing suicide. It was a very mixed up time for me to understand and process like how this could have happened. How I used to babysit the daughter. I mean, it was very hard for me to put my logical brain into this. And there was a lot of assumptions going around. There was just a lot of stuff going around. I had, there was a memorial for him. And, there was half the people like, I'm boycotting it. He's an evil guy. There was other people who went. I actually ended up not getting off of work in time. I was in production. So I missed the memorial. I had planned to go, but I was also was conflicted about it, and I just kind of was a mess, honestly. So I missed the memorial, and I also felt a lot of guilt. Like I felt a lot of guilt also for missing it. And so I sat down in my meditation chair. This was the year I started meditating. I sat down in the chair and I literally started. My roommate saw me go into my room and I was like crying. I was all like red faced and everything. I sat in my meditation chair, I was crying, and literally he came and sat down at my knee and was like right at my right knee. And he looked up and he was there with me. And I saw him and he gave me the look like, oh, shoot, you weren't supposed to see me.
Mhm.
Like, you're not supposed to see me. And he just kind of gave a little nod and he left. But that interaction was so profound. I felt it's in my body. All Everything melted away, like the guilt melted away. Any judgment about him went away because I realized in that moment, I'm never going to understand it intellectually, but his spirit isn't just this one horrible thing. it's really hard to explain other than it totally changed everything. Like
Yeah.
I just couldn't be the same after. And just that feeling that I could see somebody, that might have been one of the first times actually after my grandma that I saw a specific person.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even, he didn't think I was supposed to see him. And then it just, I felt like forgiveness. I think
Mhm.
that energy of forgiveness, it just came over me. And I, after I was done, I walked out the door and I had a whole different look on. My roommate was like, "Are you okay? Like, what happened?" Because she could see I just was so much lighter, I think. And that was, actually, I haven't really talked about that for, I don't know
Mhm.
if I ever talked about that, but it was really profound.
That's like such a, yeah, a deep and profound and healing story too. And I think that's, we've kind of crossed the barrier. We're talking about ghosts sometimes, and sometimes we're also talking about spirits, but these visual truths are there, for many of us. So sometimes it's a ghost, it might be a collection of energy hanging out in a historic home or a hotel or whatever. And sometimes it's these spirits that are more connected to people we knew in life, but they can appear as visuals as well. And
Yes.
I guess what I would like to maybe close on is just that you are not crazy if you have seen these. I mean, I think people really start to doubt their sanity, especially those of us who are curious and open, but maybe not willing to consider ourselves spiritual yet. Or we're like, oh, we must have just been dehydrated or whatever. This is a real experience. People see ghosts and spirits, or they sense them, or they hear them, or they smell them, all the time. It is a normal, real thing. It happens. And it can be jarring and scary for sure. And you also have protection, that an agency, an energetic agency, especially over the ghosts, I think, too. So as we wind down, I want to just help people remember that they can be in their power around this. Yes, you can trust yourself. If these things happen to you, if they unfold, if you see anything like the visuals we've talked about today, and if you're like not ready, or if you're in a like a haunted place, essentially, there are tools you can use, and there's agency as well.
Yes, because remember, you have more power than they do. So
Yes.
remembering your authority. And yes, we all have these different clairs, so different ways that we sense energy. And we think about what is a ghost, it's just energy. Just like the same way you can read somebody else's emotions, we're just reading energy. And energy, we're in control of the energy we take into our bodies, the energy we consume, we can say no to energy. So yeah, we have the power. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
fun.
It was fun. Thanks for sharing your stories, Missy.
And you too. Thank you.